And that's where we come in. Because we are not a party made up of college kids and career politicians. We're a party made up of men and women from a broad range of backgrounds. Different jobs, different classes, different religions, different races. That's the beauty of UKIP. This issue of whether we should govern our own country, the question of whether the government should dominate every aspect of our lives, or whether we should be treated as grown-ups that can make our own decisions, these things are not left-wing or right-wing things. This is about whether we actually want to be an independent, self-governing and proud country. And that is why we're drawing our vote now from Labour voters in Barnsley, or Conservative voters in Sussex, or traditional Liberal voters in Cornwall. UKIP is bringing that vote in from across the spectrum. We've gone up in the national opinion polls as of last Friday to 8%. We're just 2% behind the Liberal Democrats, and it is my stated aim and intention that within the lifetime of this Parliament we will overtake the Liberal Democrats, become the third force in British politics, and start to give some positive, alternative visions for the kind of country we want our children and grandchildren to live in. You see, the story is not all negative. And if anyone that's come along tonight, and by the way, how many people here are not members of UKIP? Hands up. Wow, okay, thank you. Well, if you're UKIP members, I'm going to ignore you from now on and just talk to the general public. Thank you very much for coming. You know, we're told that the public meeting is dead. We're told that people aren't interested. The reason for that is that most politicians in the so-called big parties are not prepared to do meetings like this. They're too frightened to meet the public. Well, I'm not. And when I've had my say, you can have your say. And you can say whatever you like. I promise you, after the treatment I get in Brussels and Strasbourg, I will not be offended. No, there is a feeling that there is a disconnect here. That we have the politicians on one side and the people on the other side. And if you've come along here expecting me to tell you that Europe is awful, and that Europeans are dreadful, and that Sodom and Gomorrah begins at Calais, then I'm afraid you're going to be very, very disappointed. Because the message I want UKIP to put out there is that actually we love Europe. We love the continent of Europe. It's the most fascinating continent on the earth. You drive a short distance across Europe and you find different people, different languages, different cultures. It's the beauty of Europe. What we object to is the idea that 27 independent nations should be forced together, run by the Herman Van Rompuys of this world. So vive la différence. That's the message that comes from UKIP. And from my part, I can assure you, I've got nothing against Europe at all. I'm married to one, for goodness sake. My wife comes from Hamburg. I've been sacked by 2 French companies. And I've drunk more Rioja than anybody alive in Britain today. All right, I love Europe. So let's get the message right. We want to be friends with our European neighbours. We want to trade with them. We want to cooperate with them. We're very happy to have reciprocal deals on students, on foreign workers. We're very happy to agree sensible, common minimum standards, be they on the environment or what else. We're happy to do all of those things. But what we will not accept in this party, and what we're fighting to achieve, and what we will succeed in achieving, is we do not wish to be part of a political union, especially an undemocratic political union, run by centralised bureaucrats with their now 50-year plan. Did you see that the Italian commissioner has got a 45-year plan for European transport? I mean, there's no hope of any of this working. And when you look at the euro, when you look at the miseries that the euro is now inflicting upon the peoples of Greece, upon the peoples of Ireland, and I suspect within the next few weeks the peoples of Portugal, the one thing we can say is thank goodness we ignored Westminster. Thank goodness back in the 1990s we managed to stay out of the euro and keep our own currency. Thank goodness for that. So we want to be out of political union, we want to get back to governing ourselves, and I think we need to start pushing the positive messages. We've just had a budget. Osborne called it a budget for growth. I'd hate to think what he'd do if it was a budget to reduce growth, because any of you here in small business will notice that he said there was going to be a moratorium on new business regulation for firms with less than 10 employees. Well, that moratorium applies to UK-based legislation. But of course, the rules that govern small business, be they employment regulations, be they environmental regulations, be they the increasingly loopy health and safety regulations, these laws are not made by the British Parliament. They're made in the European Union. And the other week I was invited to Twickenham. So I went along to watch the England-France game, and I was taken by a firm of city headhunters. A nice invitation, and over lunch I said to the managing director of the firm, I said, well, of course, you know, what you do and what I do, we've got some common interest here. I said, you do realise, don't you, that 90% of employment legislation in this country now comes from Brussels? Oh no, replied the managing director, it's much higher than that. So there is nothing, given we're part of this union, there is nothing that this government can do to help small and medium-sized business. And I get so angry when I watch the news at 10, because they portray business in Britain as being big business. It isn't. Over 70% of the employees in this country work for companies that employ 10 or less people. If we were able to free small businesses, to get rid of the ludicrous employment legislation that makes small employers terrified to take people on, you know, if just one in 3 companies took an extra young person on as a result of being freed from that burden, we would halve unemployment in Britain in the first 6 months. So let's start talking about a positive message, that not being part of this awful bureaucratic structure, we would be able to deregulate and we'd be able to help Britain's small businesses. But there's another big business that is of concern to me. After my failed period of education at school, I went straight into the City of London in the 1980s, that great burgeoning time when suddenly banks and money from all over the world was piling into London. And of course, you know, whilst we may be upset with the excesses of some of the bankers, please don't forget, folks, that financial services are Britain's single biggest industry. It isn't just commercial banking, because we've got insurance, we've got foreign exchange business, we've got the equity business, we've even got the spread betting business. I mentioned that because Stuart Wheeler's now our treasurer. But we've got a whole mass of businesses based in the city, and this actually is what we're good at. We have always been a merchanting, trading, outward-looking global nation, and that's why the City of London prospers and does well. And since Cameron became Tory party leader in 2005, over 50% of the income from the Tory party has come from the City of London.